Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Excel tutorial. We are going to learn how to make a bar graph, and we're going to calculate the average, the standard deviation, and the standard error. In addition, we are going to add standard error bars to our bar graph. And so let's begin. This here is a population of 2 students who measured their run and jump. And we are going to compare who jumped the farthest. Each student jumped a total of 6 times. So let me fix that. I just fixed it a second ago. But each student jumped a total of 6 times, and measurements were taken in meters. Here are the trials. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trials. So that means that our sample size, our n, is equal to 6. And these are the measurements taken from each student in meters. And so we have 1.3, 1.6, 1.9, 1.4, 1.5, and 1.8. And student 2 has 2.1, 2.2, 1.9, 2.3, 2, and 2.5. We're going to create a bar graph and show the averages of the scores from both students to see which student performed better. And we're also going to add standard error bars to the bar graphs. The first thing that I want to do is take the average of each score. And so what I like to do is put all of the data next to the data set. You can either put the data set information down here, or you can put it separate. But normally I like to just find another location on my Excel and add the data there. And so what do I need to add? I should have the information for student 1. So all I need to do is click on a cell, and the information also comes up here in this area. So let's say I need to go back and add something else. So I have student 1, and I also want to add the measurement. So that's meter. So now I can go ahead and add that back in and press enter. So when I was done, I pressed return or enter, whatever works for your computer. If I want to maximize the space here, so if you notice here, the line kind of cuts off the area. And so if I double click here, so also pay attention to how my clicker looks like. Notice that it turned black. So at first it was a white plus sign, and now it's black. And so when I see it in black, I just double click and I can spread this apart. So I clicked it twice, and now it's spread apart for me. So I'm putting student 1, and in here, I'm going to type in. And so I clicked on the cell and I begin typing. So I'm putting in student number 2, parentheses, meter, parentheses, return. And so now I want to space this out. So I can either go back up here, double click, or I can manually move this. So right now I'm manually moving this. Or I can just double click and it'll space it out for me. What I want to do is calculate the mean. And so I'm going to click on a cell and I'm going to begin typing. So I'm typing in the mean. Then I press return. When I press return, it takes me to the next cell. You can also use the arrow buttons, up and down arrow buttons, to move you around. And so the next thing that I want to add is the standard deviation, which I'll abbreviate with SD. I'll press return. And now I want to add the standard error, which is SE. And I press return. So now I'm ready. I'm ready to calculate the mean. And I'll do that here in this little space that I created. And so I'm going to click this cell. And this cell here will represent the average of student number 1. So this is the average jumps. What I want to do is click on the cell, press the equal sign, and notice that the same information also shows up here. So I press the equal sign. So I press the equal sign, and I can start typing in average. So let's see what happens when I start typing in average. A, V, and notice that the average shows up. So I click on it. So I'm manually clicking. And now a parentheses shows up and it's telling me to highlight where I want to have the average calculated. So I'm going to take my cursor and highlight the area. So I'm holding it down and I'm spreading this. So I'm highlighting all of the numbers. And when I'm done, I let go and press return or enter, however your computer works. And you get the average. I click back on my cell because I want to reduce the decimal points. And so for me, and you may have to look at this, I mean, you may have to look for it on your Excel spreadsheet. But for me, all I have to do is just look for the signs that say 0.000 with the left arrows and the right arrows. And sometimes I get them confused, so I play around with them. So let me click on this left one first. If my numbers are increasing, that's not the one I want. So I click on the other one, and then I decrease them. And I get what I want here. So I'll do it up to the hundredths place. Now I'm going to click on the second one. And normally that will be automatically calculated for me if I go to the bottom of the cell. So here's the cell. I go to the bottom corner where the little box is. And if I get a plus sign, all I have to do is click, hold it down and spread. So right here, I'm spreading. I'm spreading the box by holding it down where the plus sign was. And now when I let go, the average is automatically calculated for me. So how do I know that the average is correct? So I click on that cell and I look at the information. This says average. So here, this says average, and it highlighted for me which average was taken. And that's correct. So notice that I didn't have to, I can just press escape here. Now it's doing something else. So I'm going to press the escape button so that it doesn't stay. So I'm escaping. Okay, so notice that the averages, once I did one of them, the second one was automatically calculated for me. Now this can only be done when the data sets are next to each other. If it doesn't work for you, then you'll have to manually input it. Okay, let's do the standard deviation. So how do I start? How will I calculate the standard deviation? What should I do first? If you said put the equal sign, you are correct. Anytime you are doing a calculation, you have to include the equal sign. So I'm going to press the equal sign. And I'm going to start looking for the standard deviation. So I'm pressing ST, and I'm seeing STEV. So I'm going to just pick the simple one that says STEV, CDEV. Okay, I'm just going to click that one, the simple one. And once I clicked it, it's asking me to highlight the data set. And so I want the standard deviation of this data set here for the first student. And when I'm done, I'm going to press return. So there's my standard deviation. Then I'm going to click on the cell, go over to the boxy area here. And when my plus sign looks black, then I can click on it. I can hold down. Once I click on it, I want to hold it. I don't want to let go. So I click on it, I hold, and then I move over to the right. And when I'm done, I let go. And now both of them have been calculated for me. I'm going to keep these both highlighted so that I can fix the numbering. And so let me reduce that to the hundredths place. And there we go. We have the standard deviation. Now the standard error is something that I have to manually input. So I'm going to put equal, and I know that it's the square root. No, sorry. The standard error is the standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. And so the standard deviation is right above me. And so I click on that. That says F6, which is fine because that is the standard deviation. And we notice this is cell F6. And so that is correct. The information in F6 is added. And then I divide that. And I want to put parentheses because I want to make sure that all of the everything that is going on within the parentheses is not including anything else outside of it, because then that can have errors and whatnot. And so you want to make sure you put a parentheses. And so I put parentheses to enclose everything, and I start typing square root. So I do SQ, and here it is. It shows up square root. And so what number? And we said that it was the sample size, right? And so I know that n equals 6. And so to me, that means that the sample size is 6 because there are 6 trials, 6 samples. Okay. So because there were 6 trials, 6 data sets, that means that my sample size is 6. So I'm going to write 6. I'm going to enclose that parentheses twice. Notice that the parentheses in red is just the number itself. And the parentheses in black encloses the square root and the sample size. And so now, So now I'm ready to calculate the standard error. So all I have to do is press return, and I have the standard error. If I click on the cell and I look for the black cross, and so I have to go to where the square is in the bottom here. Now it turned black. I can click and hold that down. I don't want to let go of the click, so I'm holding it down and I'm moving over to the right. Then I let go. And so that means that the standard error was calculated for both. So let me make sure this is correct. So the standard error here for the cell was G6, which is correct. So G 6, that is correct, was included. All right, great. So now I'm going to go back. I'm going to highlight both of these cells. All I have to do is just click on the cell. When I click, I hold it down and then I move over one. And so I'm highlighting them and I'm going to fix the numbers. I could have just also waited till the end and I could have just highlighted all of them. So you don't have to highlight them all at once. All right, so now I have all of my calculations ready and I want to include a bar graph. When you make a bar graph, you're comparing the averages. So you're not comparing every single one of these individual data points. And sometimes we get confused about that, which is why I like to put my calculations on a separate area. But when I make a bar graph, I'm comparing the averages here. Okay. And so I want to press insert. I'm going to look for the bar graph. Click on the bar graph. Click on the first one that shows up, 2D. Oops, notice that it's blank because I didn't highlight the area that I wanted to make a bar graph. So all I have to do is click on it, press delete, let me get rid of it. And now let me click on the area that I want to include. So I want to include student 1 and student 2, and I want to include the information. So I highlighted this. I'm going to press insert, bar graph, the first one I see. And now this says this is the mean, this is the average of each student. Notice that it says student 1 and student 2. If I don't want the mean here, like the not the mean, sorry, the M to show up, so it says in meters, I can just delete it out from the cell. So let me just get rid of that, see? Notice that when I'm done, that is removed from here. And that is also removed from here. So I'm going to get rid of it. So now this says student 1 and student 2. One thing that I personally like to do is remove these lines here. I don't like the lines in the background. So when I click on it, notice that all of these little dots show up. That means that I'm going to do something with all of the lines in the background. And I personally like to delete it. And so it looks just better, cleaner. When it comes to a bar graph, we don't, or when it comes to a figure graph, and this is like a figure that you would put in a publication, we don't put the title above. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the title. And if you notice, a cross shows up, like a 4-way cross. So that means that you are clicking on the area. So I'm going to wait until the 4-way cross shows up. And when it does, I'm going to press delete to get rid of it. I don't want that there. I want to add an axis to the left, to the vertical part, and to the horizontal part. For the vertical part, I am going to scroll to the top here and press on chart design. So let me press on chart design. And I'm going to go to the left and add chart element. In the chart element, I'm going to scroll down until it says axis titles. And I'm going to add a horizontal title first. So I'm going to click on that. A horizontal title shows up. And so I click on the area inside and I can move it around with my left and right arrows on the actual title, and I'm going to delete it. And instead, I'm going to put the average length in meters. Actually, that shouldn't be down there. I apologize. Nothing needs to be put on the horizontal axes because the students are the ones that are part of the horizontal. The vertical should be the length jumped. My apologies. So let me go back to add chart element. This is under chart design. Add chart element. Axis titles. Primary vertical. And once I get the vertical, I'm going to click on it, delete what's inside. And I'm going to put, I can just put length or length jumped. I think I'll just put length in meters. Now the information seems kind of vague right now. And that's because the information should always go in an area called figure. So in the bottom, I would put figure 1, and then I would explain what is going on in the figure. However, I'm going to teach you about that in class, not this coming up week, but the week after. So don't worry about the figure just yet. Just practice making the actual graph. However, if you want to add a figure, if you just want to start practicing now, know that the figure legend always goes on the bottom of the graph and it explains what is going on in the graph. So you can explain that student 1 and student 2 are or have taken a jumping test to see who jumps the farthest or something like that. You can explain that in your figure. Anyway, let's go back to the bar graph. So my bar graph is looking good so far. And I can also change the color of the individual bar. So if I just double click on one, notice that only one is highlighted with these little blue dots here. And I double click on it again. And to the right, a chart will appear. And I'm going to click on the one that shows like a paint bucket. So once I click on it, there's fill and border. So I'm going to the one with fill. Then I'm going to click on the paint bucket where it says fill color, and I'm going to turn it purple. So now I can actually change the color of both. We're almost done, except that we're missing something. We're missing the error bars. And in this case, I'm going to add the standard error. So how do I do that? Well, first of all, here, let me move the chart here. It's kind of like in the way. If I ever want to move any writing inside of a cell, all I have to do is click on the cell where the writing began. I look for the hand, and the hand means that I can click on it and move. So I'm going to click. Let me try that again. Here's the hand. I'm going to click and move. So notice that I can move the information too in a cell. All right, so let's add the error bars. What I need to do is click on the bars themselves and make sure that both are highlighted. Then I go above and I click to chart design. I go all the way to the left where it says add chart element, and I click on that. And I click on the part that says error bars. And then something shows up that says none, standard error, percentage, or standard deviation. What you want to do is click on standard deviation. And notice that the standard deviation bars will automatically show up for you. But that's not what I calculated. Okay, so you don't want to do that. So that means I'm going to highlight the bars and delete them because I don't want them calculated for me. I want to add what I have calculated. So I'm going to go back, highlight each bar, go to chart design, add chart element, go down to error bars, and then double click. Sorry, just give me a second here because we should have a selection that says more options. So maybe it's the chart area. Hold on. Add chart element. I'm still trying to figure this out. Sorry. Okay, I'm back and I figured it out. My apologies. I just forgot there for a second because I haven't done Excel in a while. And Excel may work differently depending on what your computer or what kind of computer you have. And so that's why I'm recording this video to show you my version, but you may need to play around with your version. Or if you can't figure it out, there's also a lot of good YouTube videos online, or you can ask me in class. But I would prefer that you figure this out on your own as much as possible. So that way, when you come to class, you'll already know how to do this. These are some of the barriers that you have to jump. And the sooner that you learn how to make a bar graph and add error bars, the easier all of your classwork will be, especially since you're creating graphs every single week that you come to class. And so even I still have to troubleshoot to this day, and that's fine. You know, it's better to learn how to troubleshoot than to become frustrated. All right, so going back to the error bars. The way that I add error bars is by clicking both of the bars and I make sure that the blue dots show up. Then I go up to chart design. I go all the way to the left where it says add chart element. I go down to error bars and I add standard error. And it's going to automatically add the standard error bars for me, but that's not what I want. I want to be able to add my own standard error that I calculated. So for some of you, when you go to add chart element, you may have the option of more options. So you may see a tab that says more options. If it does, click that. If it doesn't, all you have to do is click on the error bars themselves. You click on them. So I double clicked on mine. And then to the right, a gray box appears that says format error bars. I go all the way to the bottom where it says custom, and I click on it. And then I click on specify value. Specify value will allow me to put in the standard error that I calculated. And whatever I do to the bottom, I also want to do to the top. You can only manually put them in. You cannot highlight the cells and expect for them to be transferred for you. You have to manually put them in. So my standard error for student 1 and student 2 is 0.09. So I'm going to write 0.09, comma, 0.09. So they're the same. The standard error is the same for both. Then I'm going to highlight what I wrote on the top bar. I'm going to copy it and paste it on the bottom bar. So now that the numbers are the same, I'm going to click on OK. And these values here are the error bars that I calculated. And so now that I'm done, I am done with this entire bar graph, and I'm good to go. Normally, again, you want to add a figure legend and explain what's going on in the figure. But like I said, I will teach you more about that in another class session. As long as you know how to make the bar graph, you're good. So let's do one more plant data example. So this is another example of plant data. And I'm going to do this one quickly. So I'm not going to take my time. I'm just going to create this as quick as I can. So I'm going to make a bar graph of the average of the height of two plants. One set has fertilizer. The other set, one set has no fertilizer and the other set has fertilizer. And so these are the average heights, okay? I'm going to go ahead and compare them and see which one has a higher plant height according to the conditions. So if you notice, I wrote the conditions here, no fertilizer and fertilizer here. And I also have the mean, standard deviation, and standard error. So let me go ahead and calculate the mean. All I have to do is press equal, average. I start calculating average. I click on it, highlight where I want the average, and press enter. Then I go to the average. I wait until the cross shows black. I click on it and I hold it, and then I move to the right, and now both averages are calculated. If it says something like div error, then that means there's an error somewhere. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go back and delete it, and let me try this again. So equal, average. I'll click on average. I'll highlight the area that I want averaged, and I'll press enter. So there shouldn't be an error. I'm not sure what the error means. Formula omits adjacent cells. I'll ignore the error. So for my, I don't even think an error will show up on yours. I don't know why it's showing up on mine, but I'm going to ignore it. And so again, I'm just going to highlight it and move it over to the right. Oh, okay, never mind. Now I see why it's not working. When I moved it over to the right and it says it's not working, it's because my data set is down here and it's not over here. So because my data set is somewhere else, I have to manually do it, which is completely fine. And I'm glad that I'm going over this with you now, even with the errors, because we all have similar types of errors. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to manually put in the average. So I put equal, average, I click on it, and I'm going to click on the cells that I want an average for, and I press enter. Then I want to add the standard deviation. So equal, standard deviation, I start clicking it, I press on the first one. I highlight the standard deviation that I want for which cell. So this is no fertilizer. I press enter, and I do the same on the other side. So standard deviation on the cells that I want. So these are the fertilizer cells. Click on it, and here I'm done. So now for the standard error, I know that the standard error is equal to the standard deviation divided by parentheses square root. So I start typing in square root. The sample size in this case for each condition is 6 plants. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in 6, close the parentheses twice, and I press enter. And so I have to do the same thing for the other side. So I press equal, standard deviation, divided by parentheses, square root of the sample size of 6. I manually put in 6, close the parentheses twice, and press enter. Now I'm going to highlight all of the numbers and reduce them to the nearest hundredths. Then I'm going to make a bar graph. So I click somewhere else on my page, and then I put in insert. Oops, sorry, I have to highlight where I want what I want to show up on my bar graph. So that means that I want the conditions plus the average. So highlight that first, then press insert, bar graph. So the picture that shows 3 little bars, I click on it. I press the very first one that I see, and I get a bar graph I like to get rid of the lines in the back, so I click on it and I delete it. I also don't need the title above, so I delete that. I want to change the colors of the bars just because there are different conditions. So I double click on one bar until only the little blue dots around one bar show up. So they can't show up on the other, just on one. I go over to the right and I click on the paint bucket. And once I click on that, I press on color, I click on color, and it shows me a paint bucket. So I click on the color and I pick something different. So this time I'm going to pick green. And you don't have to change the colors, by the way. This is if you want to. If you don't, it's completely fine. Now I want to add a y-axis. So I click on the actual chart. I go above to chart design. I click on chart design. I go over all the way to the left where it says chart element, add chart element. So I click on that. I click on axis title. Then I click on primary vertical. The vertical shows up. I click on that. I delete what's inside and then I rewrite what I want. So I'm going to put plant height in centimeters. And now I'm done. The last thing that I want to add are the standard error bars. And my standard error is 1.09 and 0.81. So I click on the chart and make sure that each graph is highlighted with the little blue dots. I go to chart design, click on add chart element, go down to error bars, click on standard error, and it automatically shows me error bars, but I don't want those. I want the ones that I calculated, and they're two different numbers, and so I want to make sure that I add that. I go ahead and double click on the standard error bars themselves. So I go to the standard error bars and I double click it. And I go over to the right where I can actually format the information. I go all the way to the bottom where it says custom. I specify the value. And for the values, I change them. So I put 1, and I do this in order. So 1.09, because that's the no fertilizer. That one goes first. Comma, and no space in between the comma, 0.81. And whatever I do to the top, I must do to the bottom. Then I press OK. And now I have my custom error bars, and now I am done with this. You always want to add a figure legend. So figure 1, this graph shows, whatever you need to write. And this information in the figure will let me know what is going on with this graph. Okay, so now it is your turn to practice with the exact same data. So let's see if you can get my values. Practice on your own. Practice on Excel spreadsheet, and you're going to turn in the Excel spreadsheet once you are done as part of your assignment. And so I have posted up the Excel spreadsheet with just the initial values. And you are going to calculate the average, standard deviation, and standard error. You are going to make an bar graph, and you're going to add the error bars. You're going to do this for the jump data and the plant data example. This is due before next week's class.